When I was 11 years old, my family moved into a house on the outskirts of a small mountain town in Oregon. The house was old but charming, nestled at the edge of a dense pine forest. It had creaky floorboards, ivy creeping up the sides, and a smell of pine and age that lingered in every room. It was the kind of place that felt like it held secrets, even in broad daylight. My parents saw it as a fresh start, a quieter life away from the chaos of the city. I didn't mind the quiet. Was peaceful, compared to the constant noise of the city we had just left. But that peace didn't last long. In the backyard, at the edge of the tree line, there was a treehouse. My dad said it had been there since the 70s. Built by the previous owners for their grandkids. The wood was weathered and green with moss in places, but it still looked sturdy. The rope ladder swayed slightly in the wind, creaking like it had a voice of its own. I was instantly drawn to it. It had a rope ladder, a tiny balcony, and a trap door that led to a smaller upper level. It felt magical, like something out of a fairy tale. I imagined all the adventures I could have up there, exploring far-off galaxies, leading pirate raids, or even hiding from imaginary monsters. The first time I climbed up, it creaked beneath my weight but held steady. Inside were a few old toys, some comic books that were damp and brittle, and a small, wooden chest with a rusted lock that had long since broken. Dust coated everything in a thick layer, and spider webs hung in the corners like curtains. My imagination ran wild. I spent hours up there, pretending I was in a fortress, a spaceship, or a pirate ship depending on the day. It became my sanctuary, a place where the world felt far away, and time seemed to stand still. It wasn't long before I noticed strange things. It started with soft thumps on the roof of the treehouse. When there was no wind, whispers that seemed to come from just outside the walls. And once, a low humming that seemed to vibrate the floor beneath me. I convinced myself it was just the forest. Nature was weird and noisy, right? My parents brushed it off too, saying it was probably squirrels or birds nesting nearby. But I wasn't so sure. One afternoon, as I was drawing with crayons on the treehouse floor, I found something tucked under a loose floorboard. It was a Polaroid photo, faded and curled at the edges. It showed two boys around my age, smiling in the treehouse. Behind them, almost hidden in the shadows, was a third figure, tall, thin, with a face that looked wrong. The features were blurred, but the eyes were too bright. They seemed to glow, even in the dim light of the photograph. I showed the photo to my parents. They looked at it briefly and said it must have been the previous owner's kids, and probably just some lighting trick. My mom took the photo and said she'd keep it in the family photo album, so it wouldn't get lost. I never saw it again. When I asked about it weeks later, she told me she had misplaced it. But something about her expression made me think she wasn't telling me the full truth. From that day, I felt watched. Every time I was in the treehouse, I had the unshakable sense that I wasn't alone. Once, I left a comic book on the floor, and returned the next day to find it torn down the middle. Another time, the trap door to the upper level slammed shut on its own while I was inside. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself it was the wind or just my imagination. But the feeling of being watched never went away. Then, one night, I woke up to a soft tapping on my bedroom window. I was on the second floor. I didn't want to look, but curiosity got the better of me. I crept over and pulled the curtain aside. Nothing. But on the glass, written in what looked like condensation, were the words "come back up." I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I begged my dad to take down the treehouse. He was confused but agreed to at least check it out with me. When we got there, it looked different. The door was open, even though I always closed it. Inside, everything was rearranged. The drawings I had made were torn and pinned to the walls, with what looked like rusty nails. And in the center of the room was the same Polaroid I had shown my parents, except this time, the third figure was closer. Dad thought it was a prank. Maybe some neighborhood kid. But there were no neighbors close enough to pull something like that without being noticed. That night, I had a dream, or maybe it was something worse. I was in the treehouse, and the tall figure was there. He didn't speak, but I understood him somehow. He wanted me to stay forever. He reached out with long, spindly fingers that looked like they were made of bark and shadows. I screamed myself awake. The next day, the treehouse was gone. Completely gone. My parents told me a storm had knocked it down in the night. But there had been no storm. Not a single drop of rain. No wind. No thunder. When I looked out the window in the morning, the place where it once stood was empty, as if it had never been there. Just a patch of disturbed earth and a few broken boards. I asked my dad if he had taken it down. He just looked at me, pale as a ghost, and said, "Don't ever ask about it again." Weeks went by. Then months. I stopped asking about it, but the memory never faded. Sometimes I'd catch my parents whispering to each other in hushed tones when they thought I wasn't around. Once, I walked in on my dad burning something in the fireplace. I couldn't see what it was, but I'm almost certain it was photographs. Years later, I went back to visit the house. My parents had moved, and it was abandoned now. Overgrown and silent. I walked to the edge of the backyard. The forest had reclaimed the space. No sign of the treehouse. But at the base of the largest pine tree, partially buried in the dirt, was the Polaroid. This time, there were only 2 boys in the photo. And I was one of them. The other one, who had stood beside me before, was missing. The background looked darker than I remembered. And the once blurry third figure now stood between the trees. He was watching. Waiting. His eyes still glowed faintly. I dropped the photo and walked away. I haven't been back since. But sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear tapping on my window. And I never, ever look. Last winter, during a business trip, I stayed at a hotel not far from that old mountain town. I had no intention of visiting, but something compelled me. That final night, I took a detour and drove by the property. The forest was bare, skeletal branches clawing at the night sky. But I saw it. The treehouse was there, standing tall and whole, as if it had never vanished. A dim light flickered inside. I didn't stop the car. I didn't slow down. But in the rearview mirror, I saw movement in the trees. And then, tapping on the back window of my rental car. I never reported it. I never told anyone. But the photo? It's still in my drawer at home. Only now, there's no one in it. Just trees. And those glowing eyes.